Dr. Clemens.
Yes.
How do you think that you did this evening? Who wasn't planning on voting for you before?
Well, I was certainly trying to reach out to everyone in the 1st District. They are all my constituents, and so I think my answers were reflective of my inner philosophy, and so they're not something that was canned or somehow the efforts of my team to tell me how to answer the questions. I feel like we were fairly well prepared for the questions that were asked. I think I would have liked to have seen maybe some questions about things like veterans issues. Perhaps minority rights could have been something that we talked about a little bit more. We kind of talked about it through the aegis of violence in the country, and that kind of morphed into minority violence, I think, and violence in our cities. But certainly minority rights would have been important to discuss. I think LGBT questions, we were certainly prepared to answer some questions about LGBT. I was very happy, frankly, to have a question about climate change. And I think that's someplace where I am really my answers are very different than my opponents. So I was happy to have that question. I think that there could have been some questions perhaps about income inequality. Maybe it's something that people would have liked to have heard a little bit more about. I was very happy that there was a question about the affordability of college and about student loan debt and some of the things that are very important to Weber State students, but frankly to students all over the country. And I'm very concerned about this law and this move to privatize everything on the Republican side in terms of student loans. I think that would be really hurtful. I think that would make it more difficult for students to borrow money, not less. But I do think that the federal government should not be making money on the student loan program, and I think I agree with my opponent on that issue. Yeah. Does that answer your question? I'm sorry. Good. Okay. Yeah, you bet.
You mentioned that you hadn't decided who you were going to support for president yet, and I was wondering if any of the third-party candidates, which way you lean, since they vary so much in.
Yeah. Well, I would say that, first of all, I'm not actively campaigning for Senator Clinton. I think that some of the issues that are important to me are important to her. Things like climate change is very important. I think education and infant programs for young people before school are very important to her and to me. I have reservations. She has a lot of baggage. I'm concerned about how close she has been to Wall Street all of her life. I think a lot of Americans are concerned about how close she is to Wall Street. To say I know more about her than I do about Mr. McEwen, who's polling pretty well here in Utah. This is very much a quaternary race. It's not a binary race. When you have at least 4 people who are getting more than 15% of the vote, there's a lot of interest out there for alternative choices to the two-party system, and I don't think that's a bad thing.
And then one last question.
Please.
For you. You mentioned that you support medical cannabis, that you don't
Yes, I do.
recreational cannabis. And you also mentioned, though, that you support less violence in minority communities and more trust with law enforcement. Do you think that the war on drugs has a big impact on that?
Oh, absolutely. I think the war on drugs has been an abysmal failure. I think the notion of warehousing entire generations of our African American population is a terribly misdirected, and I think that we should make nonviolent drug offenses. I think we should decriminalize nonviolent drug offenses and move them over into rehab, do some of the creative programs, some of the things they're doing up in the Seattle area to hook people up who are brought into police cars and vans and giving them an opportunity to go into rehab rather than going into the criminal court system. We can't afford to continue to build prisons and warehouse our people. like we've been doing for a very long time. We need a new direction. And I think there's a movement afoot to do just that. I think there are good, well-minded people on both sides of the aisle who really do see criminal justice reform. Some of them see it through a primary economic lens, but that's fine. We have to be able to afford the things we do in the country. That's the truth. So I want to work with all of those people to help move those things forward. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.